Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, we're diving in to understand just how touchscreens work.
I'm excited about this one.
Are you?
Because this one it wasn't a write-in.
But
we got this one from
verbal communication.
Yeah, we got this from our number one fan, I think, right?
Yes, Nathan, I believe his name was interested in how touchscreens work. And here we are.
I'm assuming he knows. He was more testing us. So Nathan is a young gentleman.
He is a young gentleman.
And his father was at Autodesk University. So my guess is he knows exactly how they work. And
he's seeing if we know.
He's seeing if we are any good at what we do.
Which we are not.
So, Nathan, there will be lots and lots of errors.
Yes, you can correct us.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, do you want to talk about the first touch screen? Speaking of errors, the first touch screen?
Yes, we can. And also, my speakers are on. Speaking of errors.
Yeah.
So historians consider the first touchscreen to be a capacitive touchscreen, which we'll get into what that means.
Ooh.
And this was invented by some cat by the name of E.A. Johnson. I want to be known by, like, L.M. Mahelsik. Like, I want people to refer to me with initials.
George R.R. Martin.
Exactly. So good old E.A. Johnson at the Royal Radar Establishment in the UK. This was, I couldn't find an exact date. Did you find an exact date?
1965.
Mine said 65 to 67.
Okay, well, it was a long time ago.
And this was he didn't actually make it. It was published, the description of the touchscreen for air traffic control, and it didn't get published until 1968.
It sounds like a real page turner. It was called Touch Display, a novel input/output device for computers.
Did you just call it a page turner?
Yeah, doesn't it sound great?
I think that's, wow. I've heard that before, but not in this context.
No? Okay, well, that's what it would be. All right. First touchscreen phone, I guess we would say. The IBM Simon was the first one back in 1992. That's what I saw.
Is that what it was, 92?
Well, that's what I saw, but that doesn't mean I'm right. I see you have a whole timeline, though. Do you want to get into the timeline?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Well, let's hear it then.
So I'm just going to run through it.
Yeah.
And jump in if there's something you want to chime in on. So I mentioned 1965, the first finger-driven touchscreen invented by E.A. Johnson. We mentioned it. So we jump to 1970. Dr. G. Samuel Hurst invented the first resistive touchscreen. And again, we'll get into the different types of touchscreens and what the differences are. 1971, Play-Doh. What's IV? Is that 5?
It's one of those things that you get.
No. What's the Roman numeral? What's IV? Is that
V is a 5, right?
So 1 5.
4?
4, yeah. So becomes the first generalized computer-assisted instruction system. It was the first touchscreen to be used in classrooms.
Well, that's important.
Did you work on a Play-Doh 4?
No. I still had one of those green and black screened apples because my school was a little behind the times. We played Sticky Bear Math and Sticky Bear Spelling and Oregon Trail.
Okay.
If any of you had played Sticky Bear games, you had a great childhood.
You did grow up in the sticks.
Yes, I did.
Okay,
continue on. I'm sorry.
Next up, 1982, the first human-controlled multi-touch. So previously, up until 1982, it was single. So like you would touch it with your finger, you would touch it with a stylus, whatever it was. But this was the very first multi-touch, meaning you could do
touching
with 2 different or 3 potentially. Now you can do 3-finger touch on certain phones.
You know what was great
things.
about 1982? I was born.
Really?
And there was that whatever happened that you were talking about.
Multi-touch device. This was developed at the University of Toronto.
Which shows up a lot in our top engineering schools outside America to go to.
I think, yeah, there's something going on there. Moving on to a lot of stuff happened in the 80s. 1980. It was a very good decade. Myron Kruger introduced the video place, which can track hands and fingers. So this was more of a tracking video tool rather
maybe not
than
touching it, but almost or something.
Yeah, there was cameras from what I would recall. 1983, this is also the year that HP released the HP 150, one of the first touchscreen personal computers. So this was a computer you could buy, like Commodore 64 or whatever it was, where it was actually touchscreen. Apparently, it was terrible.
Yeah, usually how it works with the first.
Yeah.
Like my brother was the first child, terrible. Then I showed up, perfect.
Okay.
All right, continue on.
1984, Bob Boy of Bell Labs officially develops the first multi-touch screen overlay. So this was a device that it would lay on top of an existing screen and turn it into a touch screen.
Oh, that's crazy.
1993, this was a pretty good year. The year I graduated high school.
Oy.
What was that for?
Well, they were probably just generously giving you a diploma, I think. But go ahead.
So this is where I saw you mentioned before the first one, but so 1993.
Okay, so 92. I was 1 year different.
The first touchscreen phone, the Simon personal communicator, launched by IBM
Simon,
and
not
Bell.
Simon?
Simon, yeah, you're right. Simon personal. I love it's a personal communicator. I feel like who's the Scotty from Star Trek, like a communicator.
So totally off topic again. I'm sorry, everyone. Did you see on our Facebook channel somebody commented? I posted about the sci-fi tech that turned into reality. He's like, well, this is where I stop following you and dislike you because whatever tracking device we were talking about showed up in one series of Star Trek, but not the other one. Apparently he was very offended.
He was
by
mad.
That. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, well, he's not following us, so he's definitely not listening. So
yeah,
good riddance. I love it was called the personal communicator.
Yeah.
1993. This one I do remember. I don't remember the personal communicator, but 1993, Apple launched a touch-capable Newton.
You remember this?
I remember the Newton because I remember my next door neighbor. His dad was what's the people that look at your eye? The eye doctor.
Ophthalmologist.
He was an ophthalmologist. He was some kind of eye doctor. They were loaded.
Eye doctor.
And his dad got a Newton PDA. And kids, if you don't know what a PDA is, it's a personal digital assistant. It's what an iPhone was before it was an iPhone, essentially.
Not public display of affection.
No, personal digital assistant.
Don't do that, kids.
Yeah. So if you don't know what a PDA is, it's called the Newton. I remember that one specifically.
Now, I remember here in 1998.
Yeah, so 1998. Yeah, this was a huge one. So Palm Inc. releases the Pilot, the first generation of its PDA devices. So basically the Palm Pilot, every sales guy in the world had a Palm Pilot. And it was the one that had the actual buttons and the screen, and some of the screens were touch screen, some of them weren't touch screen. I remember the Palm.
I wonder if Palm's out of business now.
I think they're doing other stuff. I think I remember talking about them. We should do a show on like the evolution of like from PDAs to who knows, maybe. This one I just like because of the name. So Wayne Westerman and John Elias form Fingerworks, a company that specializes in multi-gesture input devices. It's like really the marketing people at your company are like, yeah, let's call this company Fingerworks.
Yeah.
Really bad move there. So this, I love, there's an Autodesk tie-in, 2001.
Is it our alias?
It is. It's the same alias. So Alias Wavefront launches a gesture-based, it's called the portfolio wall for design teams. So essentially, imagine a touch screen that is basically the size of like a flat panel television, and you could collaborate and design and review stuff. So Alias later was acquired by Autodesk. I think in 2008 they were acquired. They're up in Toronto again, or Ontario, somewhere up north. 2002, Sony Smart Skin, again, another terrible name, introduces mutual capacitive touch recognition, which we'll talk about what that is. And let's keep on moving. I don't want to do too many more. 2008, we'll jump ahead. Microsoft introduces the Surface tablet. We're skipping the whole iPhone, iPad thing because
iPhone was the first one was 07, I believe.
Yeah. So 2008, the Surface tablet. Microsoft and Samsung partner up in 2011 to introduce SUR40, a touch-capable Surface technology with Pixel Sense technology.
Ooh.
I don't know what Pixel Sense was, and I tried to find it, and I couldn't.
Oh.
So.
And that's when touchscreens stopped being improved on.
No, I'm sure they've improved on since then, but my crack research
ends at then.
Really stopped at like 2012.
Okay, well that's good. Speaking of stopping, let's take a break for a word from our sponsor.
I'm assuming it's Palm Inc.
Palm Inc.
I think we have to give them money.
We might have to, but we do not have a sponsor this week. I know that's sad with all these companies we're nailing, but we do have a lot of shout-outs. John, short-time listener, says we should do an episode on FSAE, and he'd be happy to help us out. Like the racy
that's
stuff.
the Formula high school, or is
stuff.
it high school or college Formula car stuff?
Yeah,
okay.
Education,
okay.
We'll say. Joey has lots of thoughts on items.
Is he from New Jersey with the name Joey?
He might as well be, because he has lots of thoughts on items that should make our top 10 inventions list, such as soap and ink and instant coffee. I think that one was a joke, but soap I could see being
soap.
Honorable mention at least.
At least, because you'd die of germs and stuff if you didn't have soap.
Well, thanks for writing in, Joey. Multiple times. Danny H. from Sweden.
Oh.
A big AU fan.
What?
Autodesk University, yeah. And even listened to us do our interviews with people there.
Yeah, and if you missed them, they're all up on the
YouTubes.
The YouTubes. I think you can find them on the Unprofessional Engineering Facebook channel.
You can.
They're all over the place.
Yep, and now I'll probably get this wrong. Niha D. Here's your shout out, you cool cat. Claims not to be butthurt about not getting a shout out until now, but it doesn't really feel that way. And you might have actually gotten one in an episode that hasn't gone live yet, but there's another shout out for you.
I think that's what a lot of our listeners don't realize. They assume that like we're recording this like the day before it's released.
Mm-hmm.
James makes me record, and then he keeps them at his house in a locked safe for like weeks and weeks. Like the one we just released on Star Wars. We recorded
in
that
2018,
thing like a year ago.
Yeah,
and
over
you just
a year.
released it now. And I don't even remember what we said.
No, me neither. I had to look back at my notes to even come up with like a witty description.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, that happens sometimes. And I get yelled at for that because Jimbo especially doesn't like that. But I'm sorry, Jimbo.
Yeah, so make sure if you would like to give us some suggestions, write in at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
Yes,
we'll
sir.
send you some stickers. Make sure you subscribe and
Hop
listen
on
and
iTunes
like.
and give us a review and subscribe, or else.
Or else we'll keep doing what we have been doing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on and be allowed to talk now.
Good.
So according to touch industry expert Geoff, Geoff.
Oh, that's the worst way to spell Jeff.
Of Walker Mobile, says there's 18 distinctly different touch technologies available.
What?
Now, when we say that, I mean most of them aren't used for one reason or another, but some rely on like infrared light or visible light. Others use sound waves and force sensors, but there's really only between 2 and 5 technologies that are actually used very much at this point in the touch screen world.
Yeah, there were 2 that I really saw.
Yeah, me too. So 3 technologies go into the touch screen, and all of these are combined on top of each other, and this is for the most common practices. Toughened glass. So we've talked about Gorilla Glass before from, who is it that makes it?
Corning.
Corning, yes. Capacitive touchscreen and an OLED display. So as it turns out, 2 of the technologies dominate the market, like you just said. And so there's 2 very different ways that you can do this. So one involves moving parts, which is very odd to me, and then another is just solid state. So the one with moving parts, I think, is the one that's used less often now because there's more room for it to not work.
You're talking about resistive.
So yeah, so resistive, which has fallen out of favor.
Actually, resistive, I think from what I read, from a installation standpoint, because it's been around longer, there's more of them. They're just not developing it as much anymore.
Right. Yeah, okay, so it might be sitting out there more, but I think the new stuff isn't taking advantage
they're not
of
making
it.
much
Right.
resistive stuff.
Okay, so resistive touch. It's the traditional touchscreen technology, which is analog resistive. So electrical resistance refers to how easily electricity can pass through a material. I think we've done some episodes on this sort of stuff. And these panels work by detecting how much the resistance to current changes when a point is touched. So that makes sense. So this process is accomplished by having two separate layers. Typically the bottom layer is made of glass, and then the top layer is like a plastic film. And when you push down on the film, this just makes no sense to me that this was the best way to do things. You push down on this plastic film, it makes contact with the glass and completes the circuit. And so the glass and the plastic film are both covered with an electrical conductors, and these they're usually really fine little wires, let's call them, and they're really made of a transparent conductor material. And so when you press down on the touch screen, then the contact is made, and the grid on the glass and the grid on the film, so they touch. The voltage of the circuit is measured, and the X and Y coordinates of the touch, so wherever you're pressing on the screen, imagine it's like an XY grid, it gets fed back and calculated based on the amount of resistance from the point that you touched. So that's kind of interesting.
Interesting thing here. So if you think of this thing as a sandwich, there's actually a gap between the front, the back side of the front and the front side of the back. And this is where, if you're using a stylus, so if you've ever seen one of those tablets that you draw on, so not an iPad. An iPad and iPhones don't use resistive. Resistive touch. They use capacitive. We'll talk about that in a second. But resistive, so old school, if you've ever seen where you have a stylus and if you press really hard, so imagine like you were drawing, you press hard and it looks like the ink is darker or blacker or bolder or wider. It would actually, because you're pressing more and there's more surface contact, it could actually basically, it senses how hard you're pressing because of how much surface contact is being made. It's not like a single point of contact is being made. So some advantages of the resistive touch is resistive touch can be anything can basically activate it. Your finger can do it, a stylus, a glove. These are used in a lot of industrial applications where they need to be super heavy duty, and you might have a heavy glove on if you're a welder or you're working in an assembly line and you need to work with a touch screen. So they tend to be used. There's a very tactile feel to it. You can actually feel the screen move a little bit underneath.
This doesn't make sense to me that it was a thing.
They're super low cost in comparison to other ones, low power. Some disadvantages is they don't have a lot of great image clarity because of what they need to sandwich in between those to make them happen. And they're kind of prone, because of the way people interact with them, to having scratches and just not being... they always get beat up, essentially.
Yeah. Essentially, that is what always happens, is they always get beat up. Well said, Luke. I'm impressed that you knew the advantages and disadvantages.
I did.
That's
off the top of my head.
That's some good research.
Top of my head.
Some good knowledge off the top of your head. All right, so I already mentioned that there's the three parts to it normally, and we're going to be taking a look at capacitive next. But before we do that, let's take a break for this week's Luke's Rant.
So this rant, let me get to my rant, and I'm going to keep this related to things that are have touchscreens. So iPhones. So my iPhone is working perfectly, right? Absolutely flawless. I charge it, the battery works great.
This is the nicest thing you've ever said about an Apple.
Well, hold on. I do an update 2 or 3 days ago. It does the update overnight. No, it did it overnight. It told me it was going to happen. I should have ignored it. Now, whenever I use my phone, I literally have not used my phone all day today. Literally, there's no apps running in the background. I did the hard reboot, yada, yada, yada. I have 25% battery left. And all my phone did was sit. And I even shut Bluetooth off. And whenever I go to Facebook or any apps, they take forever to load. And this isn't a typical thing This isn't non-typical. Every single update I do.
Did you say this is typical?
Yeah, it is typical. Yeah, very. Yeah. You're right. I was confusing myself. Like nothing is working properly. All my apps are up to date, and it's just so frustrating. And I'm usually not a conspiracy theorist, James, but there's all these theories out there that Apple, when they do these updates, they purposely make apps not work. And they make your battery drain like crazy so that you are forced to go to the brand new iPhone 10 or 11 or 15 or whatever it is. And Apple claims they don't, and
it's like planned obsolescence or something like that.
Yeah. So I hope that's not the case, but it's just so frustrating.
Apple, if you're listening, why don't you send us some new phones to make up for this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Right. That's okay. I understand.
So mad.
So. Not related, but kind of. You know how you're saying, like, you can press down and it's like the harder you press, maybe it'll register more? Did you ever play video games where you really smash the A button to try and jump higher? Like, that's actually going to happen?
It made a difference. Like, you could just touch and did the exact same thing.
I loved that. Okay, so moving on about the way that your nice iPhone, whatever, 10, 11, 92, 317, whatever they're on, that's how this is going to work now. So fun fact first. Your phone's glass is 7 times stronger than normal glass, and it's about 2.5 times stronger than tempered glass.
Wow.
That's pretty strong, because tempered glass is very
regular glass
material.
Must be super weak, because my phone, every iPhone I've ever owned has had a cracked screen.
Well, just because you don't know how to take care of stuff doesn't mean that it's bad.
I've never had a broken window in my house or in my car. But every
You've
iPhone,
never had a crack in a car window that got hit by a stone?
Yeah, I have. Okay,
Stop lying.
Sorry.
My parents had a broken window in their house one time because I threw a rock through it accidentally. Oops. All right. So the protective toughened glass, super strong. The screens before the touchscreen actually used to be plastic, not glass, which is unfortunate because they were really easy to scratch. Like if you kept your phone in your pocket with your keys, you might as well not have a touchscreen anymore because it got all scratched up. But they didn't shatter as much, so maybe you want one, Luke.
Yep.
How do they get this glass so tough? They actually soak it. This is really interesting. They soak it in molten potassium nitrate at 400 degrees C.
So about 12 million degrees Fahrenheit.
At least, if not more. This makes the sodium atoms of the glass leave being
That's
replaced.
What it sounds like?
That's obviously. Okay. Everyone knows that. Being replaced by the larger potassium ions. Creating a compressive force on the surface of the glass because the little things got replaced by the big things.
So this is how Gorilla Glass essentially is made.
Yeah, it's part of it, yeah.
And then they drop it 7 stories in big sheets.
We talk about that in our Corning episode.
It's a good episode.
Yeah, check that one out. So under the glass is the protected capacitive touchscreen. Now, this thing gets a little bit serious on how things work. It's very interesting, though. So this is what senses the presence of conductive materials, such as a finger. If you can't see, I'm holding my finger up to demonstrate. This layer is actually comprised of 2 layers of diamond grid patterns printed on polyester with an optically clear insulator in the middle.
It has to be optically clear, obviously.
Obviously, right? So these diamond patterns are printed with indium tin oxide, which acts as a conductor. And one of these layers of diamonds is connected in rows, and the other one is connected in columns. So they have like
the XY
connecting them. Exactly, XY again. So how does it work? It's all about capacitors, Luke.
It is.
It is. Okay. Imagine, Luke, if you can.
I can't imagine.
There are lots of electrons on one of these diamonds. Now we have that insulator in the middle that we talked about of the 2 layers. So splitting up the 2 layers of diamonds, so the electrons can't move between those, right? This results in a negative electric field, which causes lots of positive charges to show up on the other layer of the printed diamonds, called a capacitor.
Gotcha.
Right? So now, when you move your finger close to the capacitor, since your finger is conductive, holding my finger up again, it disrupts the field being created, changing the amount of positive charges on the diamonds. This change is measured, and the processors then register this as a touch. because of the change in the field.
Okay.
So the surface is being scanned to detect a change in voltage, but only the columns are actually being scanned, since doing the whole surface of like your phone or your iPad would require way too much circuitry.
Okay.
So they kind of simplified and just check that one. So that's really how it's figuring out how, like, where you're touching, as well as like when your finger moves, it's still disrupting that field no matter what shape you're doing. But imagine how fast it must be doing that checking to be able to track your things. Like, I play games on my phone or my iPad all the time.
Yeah.
And it knows exactly where my finger is no matter how fast I'm moving.
That's interesting.
So then the last bit is the liquid crystal display, or the organic light emitting diode layer. And so we'll talk about OLED, the organic light emitting diode, today, since that's standard for your new fancy smartphones.
Yes.
And everybody needs a new fancy phone. They can't just use their old Zach Morris phone still. Do you remember Zach Morris?
I love Zach.
He was just at Steel City Con, the
Nice.
Comic-Con for Pittsburgh.
There's a whole Facebook, Twitter about how Zach Morris is terrible. Like,
Well.
basically, he got all his friends in trouble and never got into trouble.
Yeah, I like Zach Morris.
You would.
All right. So this is the advanced technology that gives you the really high-res imagery on your screen. Makes things look really pretty for all those games that you're playing. Do you play any apps?
No.
You don't.
I haven't played a video game since Delta Force Land Warrior on my Nintendo 64 or something like that. I don't know.
It's been more recent for me.
Like morning?
Like this morning, yes. This display is made up of like a super crazy, that's the technical term,
Super
crazy intricate grid of about 3.3 million pixels, meaning that there are 10 million red, green, and blue lights that can be controlled on your phone, because, you know, each one has those three. The light intensity of each of these subpixels is controlled by a really, really thin film transistor that acts as a dimmer switch for each pixel. So photons are produced by electrons driven negative to positive. Check out our battery episode,
Yes.
speaking of. But when they're passed through a middle layer called the emissive layer, photons are released. The compounds that are used to make the emissive layer, so there's different compounds that are used for each, determine the color that's then emitted. Fun fact, the Nobel Prize in Physics, check out our Nobel Prize episode, went to 3 people for their discovery of efficient blue light emitting diodes. So check out that episode.
Okay.
It got a Nobel Prize. That's pretty good.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So that's how it works. That's everything. Do you have something else before we get to a fun game that
So I have 2 that I want to mention because they
let's
were
hear it.
listed as, not used a ton. So this is probably like the 3rd and 4th most used. So one, and just the thought of these is just crazy, like how these work. So one is a SAW touchscreen.
SAW.
This is surface acoustic wave. So essentially, it senses the wavelengths. So there's like these wavelengths that are happening in the screen, and when you touch the screen, you're disrupting that wavelength in like an XY location, and that's how it tracks where your finger is.
It seems like there's a lot of the similar idea, but just tracking different stuff.
Yeah, and it's like, whether it's electricity, you're blocking a wave. I saw another one that actually uses a camera, and it just bounces the camera all over the place, and basically where your finger is, the camera can tell by how all the images are bouncing back and forth where your finger is. Another one is infrared. So this one, basically there's an infrared camera or tracker in all 4 corners. Again, whenever you put your finger there, the infrared tracking gets disrupted in the XY direction, and it can track where your finger is. It's just crazy that that there's this many different, and I guess they all have different applications.
Sure, they do.
What
I'm surprised about is that none of them run on Magic, because it seems like they do.
I feel like we should just make everything an Etch-a-Sketch.
Man, I loved the Etch-a-Sketch.
Check out our toy episode.
Wooly Willy, was that his name? The guy that, it was a face, and then it had like metal filings or shavings, and you would move in and draw a beard.
I feel like that's how we should use iPhones nowadays, is like an Etch-a-Sketch.
I do like that idea.
I think it's a
there
great
should be
idea.
an app if there isn't already.
should be.
Go make that, listeners. All right, fun game real quick.
Shoot.
No looking at my
I
screen,
won't look.
please. What can control a touch screen? Are you ready?
What type of touchscreen? Resistive or capacitive?
I don't know.
Okay.
The modern one, I guess.
Okay.
Your finger.
Yes.
An apple.
No.
Yes, an apple does work.
What?
And it's delicious. A banana.
Of course, if an apple does, a banana does.
Yes, but it works better if it's unpeeled.
Oh,
How weird
okay.
is that? A battery.
No.
Yes, it does,
What?
but only the negative side.
Wow. Okay.
That makes sense.
We can do some experiments with this.
A coin.
No.
No, it does not work. How about a leaf?
Yes.
Yes, if you can hold it steady enough. A few other things that work: potatoes, eggs, avocados.
Hot dogs.
A bag of chips, pasta, sausage, or hot dogs, or an onion.
Did you look this up or did you try all of these?
No, I looked this all up. I'm not
Okay.
going to drag a hot dog across my phone. That's just gross.
Okay.
An apple I can deal with. Hot dog, no thank you.
Now, does the apple work if you're like? Do you have to be holding all these to like complete? Like, does like the natural
You can
static
wear
electricity
a glove. No,
in
you
your
can
body?
wear a glove and do it as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that was part of the study.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why you thought of that, but
I'm gonna
I
go
like
try
it.
this.
I think you should. Hopefully everybody else is excited and going to go try this as well. Nathan, thank you for the idea on
This is
this
fun.
episode. A lot of fun. I learned a lot about how phones now work, and I can now entertain my family at Christmas this year.
Oh, I got all kinds of stuff to talk about.
Hopefully you can all regurgitate what we just said. And until next time.
See ya.